Welcome to the Recovery Show with Dr. Joe and Angelina. For the next 2 hours, we'll be discussing addiction, recovery, and human connection. I'm a double board certified addiction physician practicing here in Newport Beach and Costa Mesa. I'm joined by Angelina, an associate clinical social worker who also works in the field of addiction and mental health treatment. Tonight, we hope to inform you, connect you to the people who can help you, to help you take on life a little bit better prepared than when you started. It's the Recovery Show, and I am Dr. Joe.
And I'm Angelina.
Welcome back, Angelina.
Full of surprises tonight, Rip. Oh, my goodness. And I blush. What a week.
Yeah.
Yet again.
I don't know how I could top that introduction.
I know, right?
Rip, do you have any words of wisdom? You've been talking every hop on.
It's a great evening, guys. Great evening.
It's amazing.
It's actually been a hectic week out there. How about you, Joe?
Yeah. I've heard from other centers that they're slowing down, but we're not.
No, we're not either. And I think that's got a lot to do with what's been going on out in the industry.
That's why.
Yeah.
I just realized that.
Right.
There's a lot of patients looking for places to get plugged into.
Yeah,
and I'm wondering why we're getting all these weird detoxes.
Right. People looking for reliable places to get good care, I think.
Well, good thing we have an expert in the in studio.
We
today.
do, and I'm sure he has opinions of his own that I'd love to hear.
You want to bring him in real fast before the break?
We'd like
or
to.
You want to introduce him
I'd like you to.
Okay. Drum roll, please. I'd like to introduce my audience to Mr. Burr Cook, the executive director of Balboa Horizons, a registered nurse, which I just found out tonight. He's KDAC Level 2 counselor and a certified intervention professional. He's been working with families since the 80s. He's been facilitating family recovery workshops for the past 10 years. Welcome to the show, Burr. It's great to have you on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Angelina.
It's good to have you.
It's good to be on.
I've known Burr for a few years. Had a few meetings with him. You've been in recovery for a little bit yourself. I know that's not going to be the focus of the show, but it has a lot to do with why you got into the business.
Absolutely. Being in recovery was my introduction to the business. And there was a couple things that happened that got me actually into the business that started with me being in recovery and being introduced to people in the business.
It typically chooses you. You don't choose it, unfortunately, right?
Very much so.
Have you found that?
Yeah, very much so. I don't know how much time we have before the break, but I got introduced to the business to kind of a series of serendipitous events.
Okay, that music means we have no time before the break.
Okay. So right after the break, we'll get into that. Blush.
This is a recovery show. Welcome back. The phone number here is 949-650-1015. In studio with us, what a pleasure, Burr Cook, the executive director of Balboa Horizons Recovery Center, and our new sponsor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on the show.
Definitely.
You've been in this industry a long time.
Yeah, about 15 years. I've been in the healthcare industry since about 1975. With some time off for bad behavior, and then I got back into it. I was introduced to treatment. Actually, I was trying to figure out what to do. Newly sober, had lost my nursing license, didn't know what I was going to do. I was operating a small business in the Newport area, but very dissatisfied with it because most of my life had been spent helping people. And I was at a retreat that I go to, a yearly retreat, talking to a priest about some things, and he asked me what I did for a living, and I said, well, I've got this small business, and he said, are you happy doing that? And I said, no, actually, for the last year, I've been trying to figure out what to do. And he had asked me a few questions, and then he asked me, what makes your eyes sparkle? And I'd been searching for what to do, but I'd never heard it in that terms. And I just honestly answered him, I like I've always liked helping people, and I like talking with people. And he suggested I get into counseling, and I said, no way, I don't want to go back to school and this and that. And the conversation ended with, well, you've got some thinking to do. And I left the conversation with, wow, I put a voice to what I want to do. I want to help people, and I want to talk with people. And then the other thing was, how the hell do you make that happen?
Yeah.
And about 3 hours later at this retreat, a friend of mine who owned a treatment center had called me up to his room, and he said, I wanted to talk to you. About what? And he said, I want you to come to the treatment center and work with me. And I said, doing what? And he said, I just want you to talk with people. That's really how he answered it. And I got a little chill up my spine, and I said, that's kind of weird that I just had this conversation. And a couple of weeks later, went down to the treatment center, and he asked me to develop a group for him, and I started spending more and more time down there, and eventually said, this is what I'm going to do. And got involved in it, kind of started up at the ground level, and have had lots of different jobs in treatment, everything from admissions to counselor, program developer, family program developer, detox nurse. I've done lots of different things over the years.
What was your favorite position?
Well, I really like doing interventions. I really like working with families. You work with families on a very intimate level, doing interventions. So,
what was your experience with your family? Did you put them through any, or how about you growing up? Were you exposed to any trauma that made you more susceptible?
Sure, exposed to trauma. I lived in a family that was impacted generationally by addiction. So there was, all that and all the codependency.
So? Can you talk about that?
Sure. My dad was a workaholic for many years, and when he retired, switched drugs to alcohol and some other drugs, and died at a fairly young age. Brothers and sisters, they kind of alternated between workaholism and alcoholism, drug addiction. Everybody in my family is in recovery now, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
It's very cool.
Do you guys all go to meetings together?
One of my brothers and I do.
Nice.
I've got a normie brother, but
Poor guy.
yeah. I don't.
Hey, pick on the normies.
He's a success story of the family.
Oh, yeah, but think about the codependency. What did he have to do to keep the family together? Or to make everything okay?
It's a little more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah.
It's 6 kids, 5 different fathers, probably a total of 12 marriages. So it was an interesting trip. Yeah.
All right.
I can imagine.
It sounds like our author that we're going to have on next week. Looking forward to her book. Yeah.
So growing up, with a lot of I guess inconsistency and chaos, definitely. Yeah, something you would have been used to, and definitely trauma.
Right, and it was in the in the 60s. It was a real ripe time to be introduced to mood altering substances, and
it's perfect time.
Yeah, exactly. And so I went through that experience, and for many years, and it was a progressive thing. Through a series of weird events, I ended up getting a nursing license, which I had never intended to do. It was just...
How did that happen?
Well, I was unemployed. I'd been kind of bumming around the country and just doing that thing, traveling kind of thing. And my mother was, I believe at the time, a social worker. And she had found out about a CETA program back in the... mid-'70s, early '70s, it's a state-sponsored program for minorities to do vocational training. And she told me about hey, you can take this test, and if you qualify on the test, you can go to school for nursing and get paid for it. And so initially I thought, wow, I could make some money and go to school. And lo and behold, as I got more involved in the training and in school, I found out that I really enjoyed helping people. I really enjoyed the nurse role, probably just an extension of my severe codependency, no doubt. But it was a fit, and
you saved me the trouble of pointing that out.
Any inventory is great as far as I'm concerned. So I got involved in nursing, and that was a real good time. I was able to make money and travel and do lots of things, but I was also introduced to more drugs. I'd been doing drugs
at work.
Yeah, easy access.
Yeah, I had easy access, and I worked long hours, and you become preoccupied with sleep and things like that. Any excuse that works. I was, mostly a drinker and a pot smoker and psychedelics, things like that, and coke. But in the hospital, you're introduced to much more powerful drugs, and did that, and partying turned into a death march. Yeah, turned into loss of license, career, loss of everything. Actually, I spent years on the streets in my drug addiction, and. Wow. I was just lost everything.
I didn't know
most of my teeth and all that stuff, that goes along with it.
Yeah.
And just got to a point where people were telling me for a long time, you're going to die, and I was like, when? Because this is getting old. And just got to a point where I was so sick. Really sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
So sick that I couldn't even use anymore. And I went to a friend, the same friend who had introduced me to treatment. He was in recovery, a lifelong friend. He and I had used together. He got sober before me. And I went to him, and he helped me, gave me some direction, and ended up at Charlie Street. And
you're an alum.
Yeah. And from there, I went up, actually got sober in Mammoth Lakes, California. Mm-hmm. And introduced, I lucked out. I had a great sponsor. He introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous and how that worked. And I got very involved in that, and very involved in the service aspect and things like that. So.
Did you struggle with relapse at all, or was it a stretch?
Oh yeah. Certainly, okay. Early on, I had relapses, and it's one of those things we learn. I learned by trial and error that it's really about taking direction, and that's how we get transformation, right? Mm-hmm. But what we learn in certainly what the big book teaches us, and what we learn is that to continue to be transformed, we need to continue to take direction. So yes. I was at a meeting this morning. And yesterday too. And
nice.
I'd like to ask a question. So what do you find is one of the most common challenges you come up against working with a family?
Shame is one.
Mm-hmm. From who?
Explain that.
Usually everybody. Certainly the addict is ashamed. Families are ashamed. This is happening in our family. It's a disease of isolation, not just for the addict, but for the family. In fact, if we look at the behavioral symptoms of addicts, families generally have the identical behaviors of denial, rationalization, minimization,
so
all the things.
It's the stigma.
It's the coping mechanisms, and stigma as well, but coping mechanisms that they're using to cope with this thing that's happening in their family that ends up creating challenges. I mean, they are coping, but at a very low level, or these compensatory mechanisms that take place in a system that is threatened, mm-hmm. And when it's threatened by addiction, that's where the challenge is.
So what do you find? Like compensatory measures, like what? What do you find a family member doing on a regular basis that has to? Is it covering up?
Sure. It's some
excuses?
Form of enabling, mm-hmm. Covering up, making excuses, avoiding. Family and friends, and the world of everybody. The longer addiction exists, the world of everybody gets smaller for the most part. Some families are better at coping with it than others, but the families I work with are pretty challenged. And it's got a lot to do with system dynamics. Family system dynamics. Family system is it's a primary unit of survival. So
sure.
When somebody in that family is threatened, the greatest fear of families is that this person's going to die. Mm-hmm. And that just kind of triggers, a limbic response in a lot of families to where they're looking for immediate fixes, and most of those immediate fixes are directed at the symptoms of addiction and not addiction. So families get tied up in knots. dealing with the symptoms, the financial, the legal, the relational problems of addiction, and they're not making much headway at actually dealing with the addiction. And because of denial, which is not specific to people with addictions, human beings. You're a doctor, you know that type 2 diabetics are just as non-compliant with their treatment programs as addicts are.
Absolutely.
And in that family system, the actions and the behaviors of one individual have this effect on others. And and it's really interesting, whether it's direct or indirect, how that affects the other person, and that's what we look at. What are you doing, and how is that affecting this person, and how are you reacting, and how are you coping with it, and is it healthy or unhealthy, and pulling all that apart and getting people to work out what are you doing, and how are you taking care of yourself.
Wow. See, I don't have to do any of this. You guys do the hard part.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you keep families directed, and as it seems that the people who do the best are as practical, as pragmatic as possible, where you're trying to take them out of the forest so they can see the trees, kind of thing. How do you do that? What are the first steps?
The first step for a family is asking for help. Somebody in a family system has to hit bottom. Sometimes it's the addict, sometimes it's a family member that says, I can't do this anymore, we need help, or I need help. And then they go to seek it out.
Are we doing a good enough job at providing resources for people? At least
I don't think
information about research.
I don't think so.
Me either.
Do you think that's still a barrier? Do you guys still think that's a barrier to treatment? Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of help for addicts and very very little for families. There's certainly Al-Anon, and most treatment centers have family programs. Many of them, I think, are really insufficient. They've been dealing with this for a long time. We wouldn't ask an addict to go to a 4-day treatment center and expect them to be okay. And so it doesn't make sense to a family that's been coping poorly with addiction to go to a 4-day family program and expect that to be sufficient.
No, I think it's really important to include the family as soon as possible in that recovery process. And we always encourage the person who's in treatment, their support system. Hopefully it's the family, but to look at, and if those relationships are disconnected, let's look at, is that repairable? And if not, if it's contraindicated in any way, what's the problem? Is it possible for you to try and work on that? Who is your support system now? Let's bring them in and let's start talking to them. And sometimes we have to talk to them independent of the client for a while until we can start to look at how is it possible for us to start looking at how you can start communicating together.
I've seen really good interventionists that start the process before the family and the addict gets into treatment and is with them along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That the interventional process, like real good interventionists, stay with them and follow up.
Right. Yeah.
Have aftercare sessions.
Yeah, we work with amazing interventionists that do that.
Yeah. When I do interventions, I don't put a time limit on how long I work with a family, nor do I charge extra to work with them, because they need that support and guidance throughout the recovery process, which is a long-term process for both addict and family. And so it's really key is to take this systemic approach, and we just see better outcomes when the family is involved in recovery. If healthy families are made up of healthy family members and the family is sick because of something like addiction, well, then everybody needs education, guidance, and support, which is one of the reasons I started the family recovery workshops here in Costa Mesa, was to reach as many families as possible to help them with the impact that addiction has had on their lives.
Tell us about that.
Well, the family recovery workshops I developed as it's kind of it's a hybrid of a family program that just goes on, and the intervention tool where families are going to not only learn about the disease of addiction, and many family members not having an addiction themselves really don't understand what's going on with the addict and what's going on with the brain of the addict, which accounts for a lot of time wasted trying to control the addict. And so we do education on the neurobiology of addiction, and then we do education on family dynamics, family of origin issues.
Are you finding that more families are coming in savvy?
Absolutely.
Addiction and alcohol savvy?
Yeah, it's
versus the olden days.
Yeah. 40 years ago, people came to family programs looking for a miracle or revenge, right? One or the other, usually.
Exactly.
Right? And now they're showing up saying, I need help for myself. I'm here for me.
Right, which is amazing.
A lot of people do come in saying, I'm coming here to learn what to do about my addict. And so I kind of have to backdoor them and trick them and say, we're going to talk about the addict, sure. But really what we're going to...
Nice.
Really,
you're giving away your secrets.
Maybe the first day we'll do that for context, but for the most part, it's about self-care and getting families to get into recovery themselves. Being an addiction treatment professional, I want a family that's in recovery as opposed to a family with someone in recovery.
So if you look at the fact that, there's 12-step programs out there for families. There's one really. I mean, we respect the traditions here, so we don't really talk about the names. But they really, and there's a Smart Recovery, I believe, has some kind of program out there as well. But like you said before, there are very limited resources for families. So getting connected into a treatment center that has a really strong family program is really important. How do you know a treatment center has a good family program?
You read my
mind.
What
should they look for?
That's what I want to know.
Okay, so what you want to look for is where there is some education on the disease.
Coming from who?
From the professional that's facilitating the family program. You want to provide families with education on the disease and education on family dynamics in the disease, because lots of times they're in the forest, they can't see the trees, and so we want to explain, about these self-defeating thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors they're going through, and really get them to kind of see how this, all the focus with families of addicts is on the addict. That's their drug of choice, right? Oftentimes. And so the focus on the addict is really playing into their denial about the impact it has on them. So you want to do education on family dynamics in addiction, and certainly communication and boundaries.
Boundaries, boom.
I mean, you're not going to change a system without good communication and boundaries.
Right.
I just don't know how you would without changing the boundaries in a family.
Self-care and boundaries,
right?
Yeah, and then esteem comes back, because usually these people's self-esteems are whittled down to nothing with all the external pressures and facades that they have to put up to.
Yeah, and with this generation of younger people we're working with, self-esteem is a huge issue, and of course we've got lots of entitlement issues, but families that for one reason or another are preventing their loved ones from having natural struggles in life.
Which is not okay.
Well, it's not going to help your self-esteem or confidence.
Not everybody can get first place.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. So getting families to take a look at that and buy into, particularly with the young people, allowing them to struggle and work their program. I mean, really, healthy family recovery, everybody works their own program.
Right.
Do you agree?
Right, definitely.
So family programs that can get that message across, and then be open to ongoing support, and getting families to tap into their local support system and resources, and helping them get there and find them, but promoting that. The family program we do at Balboa is the families get very connected in that program, and quite often will stay in touch with each other long after they've attended the family program, kind of like as their own support system while they're going to 12-step support as well.
Yes, I like the idea of that.
So addiction is definitely a family disease.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the family doesn't recognize this, and it's kind of your job to subtly and gently point it out. And, we were talking during the break about how the language of treatment and of addiction is a little bit different than what people are used to. And that you have to kind of, some of the advice that you're giving is kind of counterintuitive of what people are typically used to.
Sure.
So how they're living their lives, the paradigms, and then they've got to all of a sudden kind of like learning Mandarin.
Very much so. As we're working with families and introducing them to, what works and identifying what doesn't work, a lot of the what works is counterintuitive to families and goes against core beliefs that they've had, sometimes generationally, and certainly society, core beliefs that society has. And in getting people to focus on themselves and start to work on themselves is difficult for family members because they've been preoccupied so long with the addict. And the focus is on getting the addict help, and quite often people believe that I can't help myself until we get this person help. And actually that's not true. And what I have seen, especially when you take a systemic approach, is that when more people in the family that don't necessarily have an addiction start to take care of themselves, that alone changes the family, shifts the family dynamic. The addict has generally been running the show in many of these families, and the families are one step behind. And the reason is because the family unit is a core unit of survival. They're afraid they're going to lose this person, so they're doing everything they can to try to control what somebody can't control.
Right, thinking that they can make this person stop.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the codependence that develops in them, so you have to kind of put the brakes on that. And how do you get them to recognize that? Because that's something that perpetuates the addiction. And and it's the codependence that'll sometimes tell an addict's family that you get rid of the drugs and everything's going to be better.
Right, which of course isn't true. In fact, sometimes people have been living with the addiction for so long, they don't know how to operate in a clean and sober environment.
And I see that a lot. I see that a lot as people go through a treatment program, that they are starting to change their behaviors. They're learning new ways of communication, and they're struggling with families that are not yet catching up.
Exactly, and the families, they don't know recovery principles. They don't know the language of recovery. So, one of the intentions of the community workshops I do is to teach them the language of recovery and the principles involved, so that when somebody does get into treatment and goes through that transformation, begins that transformation, the old system can collapse, and we can rebuild the system based around core values, love, respect, and recovery principles. And part of that is learning the language of recovery. When you've got an addict that's been in recovery for a while and a family that's been in recovery for a while, now they're speaking the same language when they're utilizing the language of recovery. And so, that works very well.
It's such a relief when you see that happening.
And like you said, a lot of it starts with boundaries.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Boundaries are key. And you asked me, how do you get families to buy in or start to recognize this? A lot of times it starts with getting them to recognize what doesn't work, and them taking a look at, what they've been doing over and over, different variations of doing the same thing that hasn't been working. So lots of times it's getting them to recognize that, challenging their reality. And
it's kind of like the alcoholic that keeps going through treatment center after treatment center, doing the same things over and over again that
very
are not
much
working.
So. Yeah, very much so.
It's interesting.
So we identify those things, what hasn't been working, and then start to make some suggestions. Boundaries is a touchy one because families that have been defeated for a long time and been treated poorly by the addict, they start to get a little bit of the concept of boundaries, and they want to go home and set some boundaries, and it blows up in their faces. That's
right.
One of the first things I teach them is don't go home tonight and try to set a bunch of boundaries with your loved one, because
or the flip side of that is people feel really guilty. Setting boundaries. I mean, it's the hardest thing to do. You're standing up for yourself.
Right.
I often tell people, the first is set boundaries with yourself, but I'd like to get more into that after we take our call.
John, you're back. John, line one. John from Orange County, welcome to the Recovery Show. You're live on the air.
Great. Thanks for talking.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us tonight. You have some interesting information, and I want to hear where you got this from. So what's going on with residential?
Well, we're typical Orange County family, and our son, who has a two-parent household, everything going for him, 160 IQ. We were essentially denying the signs of addiction and lowering our standards. There was things that started going on that even 6 months earlier we wouldn't deem acceptable.
Wow.
But it slowly kind of takes on your life, and as parents, we just love our kids, and hey, we're gonna go down that path.
So how does it sneak in?
You find out you've got a huge addiction problem. In this case, opiates and alcohol, and
so it starts.
We went through several interventionists and thousands of dollars, and we forced our son into a treatment center. All of it failed. Then finally, my wife got a hold of Burr Cook and just literally cried on the phone with our story. We were going to lose our son. He was going to die. And he said, you know what? Hold on to that thought. What about you folks as parents? How are you doing? Well, he ended up going to his meetings and realized we were probably as sick as our son. And I like to refer to it as co-addiction. Although we don't do drugs, our son's addiction made us terribly sick to where we stopped doing anything, and our focus was on trying to keep our son alive by giving him food, gas, driving him, giving him a shelter, paying all his bills, cleaning up all the fires that he'd create. And all we were doing, he was getting sicker that whole time. We were prolonging this whole thing. So we finally stopped. Going to the meetings, learning about it. I didn't know anything about it. This was all news to us. I thought, hey, we love our kids. We fix their problems for them. Nope. That doesn't work. And believe me, these kids know how to take that love and use it like an ATM. So they will. They'll just take everything from you. And when it's gone, you still might not realize what just happened. But I'll never forget one day we told our son, hey, he asked us where we were going because we were leaving him all by himself. He said, I said, well, you know what? Your addiction has made us terribly sick. And maybe in a different way, but we're terribly sick. And we're getting help for ourselves. And he had a puzzled look on our face. And then he was going to play it.
You can't do that.
But 2 or 3 of these meetings, and then all of a sudden some of the things we were changing and we weren't reacting. And he'd demand we do something. I need money right now. If I don't get money right now, then I'm not going to be able to do this, or something.
Or I'm going to go do something to myself, and you'll be sorry. Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Geez, I'd love to help you, but if you want an answer from us, I have to think about it. Because they'd love to push us for an answer right now. We want it right now. But he learned real fast when we'd say, I'm going to think about it, but if you want an answer right now, the answer is no.
Huh.
Takes care of the argument, and it gives us a breather, and usually that emergency that they have goes away. So we start doing that, making changes, and believe it or not, we didn't believe it at first, but things started changing. There's a lot more to it, but things started changing, and instead of all of us helping our son over the cliff, we stopped, started heading another direction. He's standing there all alone. Looking around, and eventually he started kind of coming in our direction. It wasn't that easy. It didn't happen overnight. We're talking an addiction that lasted better than 4 years, and we still fairly regularly go to the family meetings. Without those, I just don't think our son would be alive. And maybe something would have happened to us as parents. I just don't know. But those meetings have absolutely saved our lives.
John, a quick question. What was the hardest part? It's got to be the most difficult thing, and I'm sure there are parents that are out there listening right now. 949-650-1015.
The hardest part is...
How do you say no to your kids? I mean, I've got a 17-year-old that I can't imagine not following around, putting out.
It's the hardest thing, and I remember at first, you go to the meetings, and I can, obviously I know a lot of kids with the same problems. I know a lot of the parents. I'm kind of involved in a profession that I interact with them at some point in their addiction now. But it's easy for me to walk up to them and say, hey, kick your kid out. Don't give them any money. Turn off the phone. I can tell that to them all day long. And that's what we were told. But when you try and practice it as a parent, it makes you physically ill. I'm a terrible parent. I'm withholding love from my child. I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't forgive myself. And the addict knows how to play you. They're excellent survivalists. And our son would either play me or my wife as the weaker link. And as it turned out, my wife happened to be more draconian and steadfast. I was the weaker link.
She was bad cop, you were good cop.
Yep. So I just didn't have the heart
works.
with my own child. And I'd be the guy going down to the gas station and putting $10 gas in his car. Don't tell Mom.
John, this is Angelina. I have a son who has 2 years in recovery now. And I was a therapist at the time when he was deep in his addiction and working in addiction myself. And I remember kind of, like you say, being able to go up to the other clients and be able to tell them what to do and be able to give them the guidance they needed every day, but not being able to help my own son when he needed it the most. And I had to get somebody else to come in and do that for us because I was a mother first, and I just couldn't. I wasn't able to pull my own training into practice because I was a mother first, and it was really difficult.
And these kids know that. Our son, he could play me 7 ways from Sunday.
This John is a good reason why these workshops are helpful, is because as you were going through this and you were asked to do some things that were counterintuitive, very difficult when you're a parent of that child. Your greatest fear is that they're going to die. The people at the workshops and the principles we talk about actually support you as you're making these decisions that are very tough, that you feel guilty about.
You do.
And we want to look at, why do you feel guilty? What was it in your own upbringing that caused you to respond this way or react this way to living with addiction? But your story, John, was actually a really good one because you went through all those difficult things that parents had to do, but through regular attendance at the meetings, found the support you needed to get you through those moments of saying no for the first time and living with the fear of what that was going to do, and then getting to the other side of it and setting some boundaries for yourself when all of your energy was directed at trying to help your son, and most of that energy, if we're honest with ourselves, was really about fixing the symptoms of his addiction. But you stayed the course, and I think one of the reasons you were able to is because of the support you had from the other families there and the guidance that you received.
Yep, that is so true. And the meetings were every Thursday night, and that was our big night out. That was the beginning of our ability to go. It wasn't until we were at those meetings when a question was asked, what are you doing for yourselves?
Right.
And I looked at my wife. She looked at me. We had a puzzled look in our face. We realized for the past 2, 3, almost 4 years, we hadn't even been to a movie. And then what's our family life like? We realized we have deadbolts on every door in our house. We have cameras inside and out. We realized that we're always on the computer monitoring phone traffic and doing all these crazy things. We were insane.
It's insanity.
Addiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it made us insane. And I remember sometimes by Tuesday or Wednesday, the anxiety would build up terribly.
Yeah, I remember that too.
I couldn't wait to get to the Thursday meeting because that was safe. I could talk about it, and that would give me the strength to get through another week. And there's sometimes I'd come in there and I'd admit I relapsed. It sounds funny, but I relapsed. No, I was supposed to be the strong guy, but I gave him $10 for gas, something like that. And it's okay. The parents have to realize you aren't a bad parent. This is hard. But if you stick the course, it's more likely than not that good things will come out of it. And, our son is 14 months clean and back in school. And in fact, right now he's driving back from Plano, Texas, in his new car that we had nothing to do with. It's his own deal.
Isn't that a great feeling?
Congratulations to you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I apologized to him, and he actually came to a couple of the family meetings, and I apologized to him because I said, son, I didn't realize that by me trying to give you everything, even things I didn't have as a kid, and doing things for you, I was robbing you of life's experiences, good and bad.
What do you think was the greatest risk factor? Whether it was how you interacted with him or something that was intrinsic to your son? Because parents are out there and they probably want to know, are my kids at risk, or what can I do to prevent this? And I know there's no magic answer, but is there, we always talk about resilience, and I mean, is there something intrinsic that you might have done differently?
I don't think so. I always thought addiction is something that happens in that other neighbor. It doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen on our street. We provide everything. We're always here. Our kids are involved, but for us, there was some traumatic events in our family's lives, and that may have played a role in it. I just don't know. But it sure did happen fast. There was a lot of parties. The high school kids, they get on that text message. There's a couple times, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, we went to a movie, and we got out of the movie and drove up the street, and we couldn't drive up our own street. There was cars blocking the entire street. We thought, geez, what's going on? So I said, well, I'll go find a place to park. And my wife's going up the street, and I get a text message. She said, there's a party at the house. And by the time I got to the house, there was probably 200 kids.
200,
in our house.
yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Where were those parties when we were growing up?
No.
This is the kind of stuff that started going on. We would have never in a million years have accepted that.
Right.
But looking back, our standards started getting lower, and we started accepting things like that.
Well, you became casually conditioned to it over time.
It creeps in. It's like the frog that boils over hours as the heat gets turned up. Hey, John, listen, we have to go to break. Thank you for your call.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for your experiences.
And all you folks out there, have faith, get some help, and I promise you, things will be better.
They will. You have to take that first daring step. Daring greatly.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. It sounds like your workshops are perfect for that. Tell us a little bit more about the workshops.
So the workshops, they kind of go through a curriculum, if you will, although it's flexible enough because I never know who's going to show up. It's flexible enough that I may kind of go back a couple classes, if you will, if I have a lot of new people showing up. It generally starts out with the brain science and chronicity of addiction, and there's little things that I've learned over the years to help families understand addiction from the addict standpoint and what they're going through, and it's oftentimes employed. Some of those things really helps put things in perspective for the families. And then we'll get into, like I said, family dynamics and addiction and some of the coping mechanisms that families will adopt that are self-defeating, thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors that are self-defeating. We'll take a look at those. And then we'll start to get into healthy communication and boundaries. And I'll use sociometry, I'll use role-playing, I'll use sculpting exercises, which are, they're fun.
Right.
And the families really get it, when they're involved in a sculpting exercise, whether we're sculpting recovery or sculpting enabling, or, there's there's all kinds of things that you can sculpt. So I do a lot of experiential stuff in my workshops that I've learned over the years. First of all, I'd like to thank all the people that called in, and thank you, Joe and Angelina, for giving me this opportunity. You know, I could talk about this all night. I want to encourage anybody out there listening that there is help out there. You're not alone, and I know it can be difficult to show up, but my experience is with the people that show up and keep coming back is they're coming back for a reason, and it's because they're finding solutions and they're finding relief. And if you're out there and you need solutions and need relief, it's out there. And these workshops that I do, they're free. They're every Thursday evening from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Sometimes we have guest facilitators. And really all you have to do is show up. Make a decision to show up, and Providence will take care of the rest. The people that need to show up in your life, the things that need to happen will happen. And I've been watching that happen for years for people. You just need to show up.
I find if you meet the universe halfway, it's going to give you everything you need.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I watch it unfold all the time.
Yeah, I think we all do in the positions that we're in right now. It's amazing.
How gratifying is this that you've done this?
Well, I love it. You know, it makes my eyes sparkle, and kind of like in the story I told earlier. I'm a pretty lucky guy.
Going back to the priest on the bench.
Yeah. Wow.
These family recovery workshops, they're at 129 Cabrillo Street in Costa Mesa. Every Thursday, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m.
Just show up.
That's one. Yeah, just show up. Nice. Bring your beautiful selves, and you'll be amazed. 129 Cabrillo Street. And can I give my phone number if they want to find out about it? Is that cool? Okay. Get your pens and papers. My phone number is 949-903-3008, and I'll be happy to tell you all about the workshops and how to get there. And again, they are free. All you need to do is show up.
Sounds great. Thank you for sharing the information.
Yeah.
All right, any last minute wise words, Dr. Joe?
I have none. Our guest was amazing tonight.
Yes, he was.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, this is the beginning of a great friendship.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I have other things I can talk about as well.
I told you tonight was going to go fast. We need another hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, it flies. It really does.
Great.
All right, so
Okay.
another fantastic show.
Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to our phone callers. Thanks to Balboa Horizons, our new sponsor. Yay!
Happy to do it. Happy to support you guys. Thank you.
Very much.
And thank you, Costa Mesa, Newport Beach. Thank you, iTunes. We're on iTunes. We're on SoundCloud. Just Google The Recovery Show with Dr. Joe and Angelina, therecoveryshow.org. We're on Facebook.com/The Recovery Show. And we're all over the place. Every show that we've ever done is up on iTunes. So subscribe, and you'll get us delivered as soon as I put it up on the air. Angelina, thank you for a great show. Rip, thank you for a great show. Gia, thank you for a great show. Austin, thank you for taping us. We're gonna put our first compilation on YouTube, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
All right, guys, have a good night. This is The Recovery Show. I'm Dr. Joe.
And I'm Rachel.
And until next week, stay close.
Good night.
So just give it one more try.